I brought you on to talk about the concept of NBA eras, and then we'll do some finals in the end. But for the people listening, this is not just a Celtics statement. House is my NBA historical conciliary. We've known each other for 35 years. We've talked a lot about when we watch current basketball, how it relates to the basketball we've already watched, the teams we've watched, the players we watched. And the Celtics are at a crossroads house. And it's not just about them. It's about what do you do when your franchise kind of falls into this specific situation. So I went back and I sent you all the research I did. Like, how unique is it to be 5 conference finals in 7 years? What's that list? Or who's close to the list? What are the types of teams? And it's really interesting what the research says. The window is basically 3 to 8 years historically, where you have, like, on the shorter end, you have the Drexler Blazers, who made the conference finals 3 years in a row, 90, 91, 92. They made the finals in 90. They made the finals in 92. And then MJ took Drexler's heart and he pulled it out, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom style. Just pulled it out. He waved it to the crowd. And we never saw them again until the late 90s. They were done.
True story.
So that's the shorter end, where it was this team that was just really, really relevant for a short period of time. That actually, House, would you... I mean, you could probably do this. Compare and contrast the Drexler Blazers to the Jason Jalen Celtics. Some similarities, like incredible talent, found a great way to shoot themselves in the foot at the worst time, lost some close games, a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas. But, you know, we always watched those Blazers teams in college and we were like, God damn, Blazers, stay out of your own way. And they just never could, right?
Yeah, and I honestly think, and this is part of the bias, the old guy bias, but I think that Blazers team was super talented. Like
they really were.
I would put them up against the current version of the Celtics and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was, as we've always talked about, that's probably the best stretch of talent for the league ever. That 90, 91, 92, 93. They beat the Lakers in a series, right? They went toe-to-toe in that Detroit Pistons 1990. They lost in 5, but it was a really good series. And then, you know, they stumble into MJ in 1992. What can you do? So that's the short end. The longer end, you're talking about teams like the Julius Erving Philadelphia team. And then a team that I never even occurred to me would be a team that would be in the discussion, but is the kind of the clear comparison. The Celtics is this basically 94 to 2000 Indiana team, which I would call the Reggie Miller Pacers, the early edition. So they made the conference finals in 94, 95, 98, 99, and 2000. They made the finals in 2000. They had a little bit of a reboot in 96 and 97 where they lost first round, no playoffs in 97. And then they kind of kicked it back. They had 3 Game 7 Eastern Conference Finals losses. And then a really tough 2000 finals loss that I think you and I both feel like that series has been kind of lost in history. A lot closer and a lot more competitive than I think people remember. Now, this is like Jalen and I, this is one of the first things we bonded on. It's like, God damn, you guys were like a couple plays away from winning the title that year. Like nobody mentions that. But look at that though. It's a 7-year run, 5 conference finals, 1 finals, very similar to the Celtics, right?
Yes, totally agree. Again, a pretty deep team. I mean, they really had talent, front court talent, back court talent. Reggie was the clear leader, but you know
they're physical. They had the Davis brothers. They could play a lot of different veterans. Ways. Yeah, there was like Chris Mullin was there for a little bit. They had Mark Jackson.
Yeah, they could play a lot of ways.
They had the young guys with Jalen and Best. So the reason they're interesting to me is in '99 they were thinking long-term, big picture as they're competing, and they traded Antonio Davis for the number 5 pick, who turned out to be Jonathan Bender, who turned out to be a bust. Now, I think he might have gotten hurt, but he was like one of those 7-foot small forward guys. Those guys I'm out on almost instantly.
Yeah, not ready.
Yeah. And then the next year they traded Dale Davis for Jermaine O'Neal to Portland. So they were always like competing but thinking ahead. But when I look at them, that's a good example for how do you extend your window while still competing? And we've seen all these teams like just going through. Like, we'll go back to Philly in a second because that's the most interesting one. But the Milwaukee Bucks, the Don Nelson era, 8 years they were competitive, 3 conference finals. They lost 3 game sevens in round 2. They were in the same conference with Philly and Boston. They did some stuff we'll talk about in a second. Phoenix had the KJ Barkley era. That was 7 years. They made 3 conference finals and the finals once. They lost 2 game sevens in round 2, or 3 actually. 2. And then Utah was the other one where they just kept it together for 10 years. They made the conference finals in 92, 94, 96, 97, 98, made the finals twice, made 3 round 2s. They went the other way. They're more similar to the Celtics, where they really only made one big trade, which was Jeff Malone and a first for Jeff Hornacek. Why all of this is relevant is the Celtics have to look at this and go, all right, we keep these guys together and we're going to get over the hump. But the entire NBA history says teams like this don't get over the hump. They actually go the other way. That the one exception was the Philadelphia 76ers, who made the conference finals in 77, 78, 80, 81, 82, 83, 85. 8 times or 7 times in 9 years, they made the finals in 77, 80, and 82. But it wasn't until they made the Moses Malone trade that they got over the hump. My question for you, House, is it a Moses Malone type trade that would save the Celtics? Do you have to kind of do what Indiana did, a better version of it, where you try to do your John Bender, Jermaine O'Neal while staying competitive, but thinking like almost like a second era opening up? You got Tatum was only 25. You got a lot of time left. They're a younger team. The other downside team that would be possible would be the OKC team, which 4 conference finals, 11, 12, 14, and 16, made the finals in 2012. And they didn't do a lot, which I want to dive into, but all of a sudden it was over, right? KD leaves, it's done. And the Celtics are at a crossroads here, because if they do the Jaylen Brown and they trade into Houston for number 4 and all these picks and be like, we're going to stay competitive, it might be the OKC thing where it just never happens again. Or you try to trade, some of the lesser guys, keep Brown and Tatum. Do you agree with me that this team is at the crossroads?
I do think they are at the crossroads because of the collective bargaining agreement that is staring the entire league right in the face. It is about to be a radically different competitive landscape, and the particular challenge that the Celtics have right in front of them right now, which is why it's a crossroads moment, is can you afford to pay 2 players max money? And look, these 2 players, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conference finals. Do you believe in your heart of hearts that those 2 guys are capable of actually winning a championship with the right role player? So in this era, the thing that I'll put to you is, what's your level of confidence that the guys doing the drafting for Boston and the guys doing the looking at the roster are going to be able to grab some of the Miami mojo and find super inexpensive players who can play meaningful minutes in playoff games and make a meaningful difference in terms of the outcomes of playoff games, because that's the environment that I think we're about to be operating in. You can afford 2 all-NBA players, but that's it. You must surround them with super cheap guys that are capable of making contributions. And the window is not very, it's not a long window. You're going to get maybe like 2 years, 3 years max out of these inexpensive guys. I think that's like the size and scope of the problem that we're looking at right now. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, because you think 2 years from now, you got 2 max guys, basically, if they keep Jaylen. You got White making like 18 million a year. You need him. There's 3. And you probably can get away with 1 more guy in the 14, 15 range. And then after that, you're just trying to get lucky with the Caleb Martin types, or you're trying to get lucky with your 2nd round pick, or your end of the round, 1st round, or whatever it is. The White trade, if you're just going backwards and you're like, who are the unquestioned keepers? You would say Tatum, and you would say Brown, you would say White. And then the rest of the roster is kind of TBD. And I don't like Rob Williams every year gets hurt. There's always like a different story. Even in game 7, it's like Rob Williams was sick. He was running back to throw up. It's like, well, it was game 7. Is there, do we have a lot of evidence that Rob Williams is going to show up in big games? So you start looking at these people like, all right, Am I better off playing Rob Williams $14 million a year, or can I do a stopgap free agent center? And that's the other thing is on the market are going to be all these guys because the CBA, the Players Union, is going to destroy the middle class. Basically, you're gonna have a lot of guys like basically taking much cheaper money to play for good teams, which would be an advantage for the Celtics, right? It'd be an advantage for Denver, a couple others. The bigger question for me, and my dad and I talked about it a little, is just like, did he hit the ceiling with this team? And that's why I went back and did all the research, because in a lot of these cases, the team hit the ceiling. You know, like Philly in 1982, they got their asses kicked by the Lakers. And it was just clear, like, this isn't going to work. Dr. J's getting a little older. We have a Caldwell Jones, Daryl Dawkins center combo. We just don't have enough. Like we're always going to get overpowered down low, and we got to do something. And the Moses trade stumbled into their lap. They only gave up Caldwell Jones and a 1983 first for the best guy in the league at the time. Milwaukee was in a different point where they lost. They lost in round 2 in 80 and 81 in game 7. They lost the conference finals in 83. In 84, they make a pretty ballsy trade. They traded Marcus Johnson, who was great, who was just an awesome forward, with Harvey Catchings and Junior Bridgman. And they got back young Terry Cummings, Craig Hodges, and Ricky Pierce. And they rebooted, and they were able to go conference finals 85 and 86. They lost a heartbreaker to the Celtics in 87 in round 2 in 7. And they traded for Jack Sickman 86. But they were on the fly going, we've hit our ceiling, we got to make a move. And when they traded for Terry Cummings, I think all of us were like, holy shit, they got Terry Cummings? That guy's awesome. Yeah, so he'd only been in the league for like a year. Then you look at a team like Phoenix. So they had before they got Barkley, they made the conference finals in 89 and 1990. And in December 1990, they made their move. And unfortunately, it was a terrible move. They traded our guy, Eddie Johnson, our dude who is now known as Justin Termini's sidekick. That's how he's officially introduced in restaurants. I'm kidding, Eddie. They trade Eddie Johnson and 2 first-rounders for Xavier McDaniel. And McDaniel comes to Phoenix, and he bombs. Like, you go look at his playoff stats. He averaged like 9 points a game in the playoffs. They suck. It ruins their 91 thing. Kind of ruins 92, too. And then that leads to the Barkley trade. So sometimes, House, when you make the kind of big move, it can go sideways. You can end up with the Xavier McDaniel thing. Portland set up the Drexler era. They traded Sam Bowie and Mookie Blaylock, who was going to be a rookie, for Buck Williams. And that kind of ignited them. Then they traded a first for Danny Ainge. But then they started fucking up. They traded Drazen Petrovic for Walter Davis, who was on his way out. They gave away Robert Pack for a second rounder, and they kind of fucked that up. The more recent examples, I really have trouble putting Phoenix in here. Phoenix is another one like this, where they had a specific 6-year run. Conference finals, 05, 06, 2010. 2 brutal Spurs losses in round 2 in 2007 and round 1 in 2008, where those were really the Western finals for the most part. Or say the Lakers in 08, obviously. But for the most part, all their moves were to save money. So I don't even know what we can learn from them other than that don't have Robert Sarver on your team. OKC is a good one because they make the 4 conference finals and the 1 finals. They didn't really do a lot to improve that team. Like if you're talking about Presti as one of the great GMs, which I think he is, this resume of moves here where they traded Jeff Green in a first for Perkins in 2011. They did a lot of like around the fringes. Then they trade James Harden for Kevin Martin, Lamb, and Adams, basically. In 2015, they traded first for Deion Waiters. And then in 2015, they also traded Perkins and Reggie Jackson. And in 2018, first for Enes Kanter and Steve Novak. Pretty rough. So they couldn't kind of figure out how to patch it together. And yet, they almost won in 2016. They're up 3-1. Clay has the heroic game 6. And I think that was KD going, we've hit the wall. I can't win here. And I wonder with the Celtics, if they're looking at what's happened to them, do they see a wall or do they see bad luck? Do they see Curry in game 4 last year leaving his body in the second half and just fucking single-handedly switching the series? Do they see Miami where they just kind of fuck up the first couple games and then it's just too hard to beat them 4 times in a row? Can you excuse what happened, or is it a symptom of something that's missing from this team?
So it seems to me it's more like, and I think Oklahoma City, of all of these teams that we're comparing, is like the most apt comparison because those guys were all
younger.
young.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. So you have that added element of uncertainty about, sort of team building. You know what you have in KD and Westbrook, and we thought they knew what they had with James Harden, but apparently they didn't know what they had.
We knew what they had. We at least knew he was going to be an awesome six man for them. We didn't know he was going to be an MVP.
Well, but I think there is something in between bad luck and hitting a wall, and I think that in between space is what Boston occupies right now.